destiny in the balance. But remember this, whatever you seek in the form of rewards, you must first earn in the form of service to others. All attempts to sidestep this law will end in failure, frustration, and ultimately demoralization. We can see this frustration on every side. We can see it in the tense, strained, and nervous faces, and in the mountains of tranquilizers that are consumed every day. And we can see it also in the slack, bovine like faces of those who have found the whole game too complicated and have simply given up, surrendered to the push and pull of circumstances. So, how much of this do you suppose is due to the misunderstanding or ignorance of this simple and wonderful law of nature? It's my belief that a great deal can be traced to these causes. Now, do you understand this law, fully understand it intellectually and emotionally? If you do, you can chart a wonderful course through life. Just as the field worker stepped off the speeding truck, just as a child will put its fingers in the way of a closing door, just as a speeding driver discovers he's not going to make the curve, how many times have you been confounded because you acted contrary to the rules, not only to the rules of man, but also to the rules of nature? How many times have you been in position of the man who sat in front of the empty fireplace and said, "Give me heat, and then I'll give you some wood"? People seem to be divided into those who understand that the wood must be put in before they can expect warmth, and those who feel they should get warmth whether or not they do anything about it, or who feel that they should get maximum heat from too small a supply of wood. A person's discontent can be said to be measured by the distance between what he has and what he wants. Once that which is wanted has been achieved, the odds are good that still more will be wanted, for that's the way people behave. And that is good. It's a healthy sign because constructive discontent is what is responsible for our continuing upward spiral civilization. Let's assume you've determined what you want. Look objectively at the place in which you now find yourself. Consider the distance separating you from your goal and determine ways of increasing your service so you will build a bridge across it. This puts thought and creative activity into living. It also assures us that our goals can be achieved by unavoidable effort and in the shortest possible time. One morning, I was having breakfast in a restaurant in Monterey, California, one of the most naturally beautiful places in the world. Suddenly, I was aware of the young couple sitting in the booth next to mine. They couldn't have been more than 25 years old. It was obvious that they were very unhappy. The young man was saying, "Well, I've tried everywhere, but nobody wants to give me a job. I guess we'll have to go back home." It was apparent from their attitudes that they wanted to live in the Monterey Peninsula, but they were almost out of money and unable to find work. But he said, "Nobody wants to give me a job." He wanted someone to give him something, and in this case, a job. What might have happened if he had turned the whole idea around? What if he had said instead, "What do I know how to do that will serve some of the people of this beautiful part of the world?" Or, "How can I or we be of value to this community?" Or, "The people here will be happy to supply us with the living we need if we can think of some way to serve them." If we can think of some way to serve them, what do we need or want that we can supply? Do they need a handyman, a first-class housekeeper, or both? Can we wash and wax cars right in their driveways? Can we detail the cars so they look like showroom display models? Let's buy a pad of paper and a ballpoint pen and start making a list of all the things we can do to earn a living here. It will give us time to think of other ways, more profitable ways. But that wash and wax idea might grow into quite a service for the community. And let's not stop there. Let's think of some more ways we can start right here to be of service to the people who live here. Right there in that restaurant, instead of being depressed and considering themselves failures, they could have come up with a dozen or so ways in which they could have remained on the Monterey Peninsula and built a fine business for themselves. They didn't need a job, they needed to think. But they had never thought before. It was a foreign thing to do for them as speaking Urdu. There they were, two fine, bright, good looking young people with whom they possessed two fine minds. A world of opportunity was beckoning to them, and they were going to go back home. No one had ever told them about the gold mines they carried between their ears. Do you know how many people would have reacted in the same way these young people reacted? Most of the people in the United States, or any other country for that matter, people will do everything in the world, even turn to crime, before they will think. George Bernard Shaw once commented, "I have become rich and famous by thinking a couple of times a week. Most people never think at all." The young couple in Monterey, conscientious as they were not sowing. Therefore, they could not reap. They were putting nothing into their community. Therefore, they could expect nothing in return. To some, this seems unfair, but it isn't. It's eminently and wonderfully and abundantly fair. Our job is to do the sowing. That's our department, and that's all. The rest will take care of itself. We've been given the equipment free and clear. All we are asked to do is use it. Unfortunately, thinking is not taught in the public schools or in most of the private schools for that matter. As incredible as it may seem, thinking is a subject that is totally ignored. A person's world can be compared to a plot of ground. It exists. It's there. It has inherent within itself an astonishing potential, and it's prepared to react to a person's every action. In fact, it must. Whatever your job happens to be, think of it for a moment as this plot of ground. In the beginning, there's nothing there but earth. If a person sits and watches it, nothing will happen to it. If a few seeds are tossed on it, the rain and the soil's natural fertility will combine to reward that person with a few results for limited efforts. Action, reaction. It all depends upon just what is wanted from this plot of earth. It's what is wanted that must first be decided. Let's say what is wanted is a beautiful lawn bordered by flower gardens with a big tree under the shade of which the person can sit down one day and admire the work. So the areas for the gardens are marked off, the soil is cultivated, smoothed, and cleaned of stones and trash, the lawn flowers and tree are planted. From this point on, anyone observing this plot of land can evaluate in a second the amount of service, the contribution this person is giving to the project. How can you tell? You can tell by seeing what the land is giving back to the person. Now, we are given the plot, and that's all we should be given. Planting the plot is only the first step. How we tend it determines its degree of greatness and success. There's a story about a preacher who was driving by a beautiful farm. The fields were beautifully cultivated and abundant with or well cared for crops. The fences, house, and barns were clean, neat, and freshly painted. A row of fine trees led from the road to the house where there were shaded lawns and flower beds. It was a beautiful sight to behold. When the farmer, who was not working in the field, got to the end of a row near the road, the preacher stopped his car and hailed him. The preacher said, "God has blessed you with a beautiful farm." The farmer stopped and thought for a moment. Then he replied, "Yes, he has, and I'm grateful. But you should have seen this place when he had it all to himself." The farmer understood that he had been blessed with a fine farm, but he was also aware that it was his own love and labor that had brought it to its present state. Each of us is given a plot to work, a lifetime, and the work we have chosen. Like the farmer, We can be grateful if we have the vision, imagination, and intelligence to build well and successfully upon the seemingly unimpressive land of our beginnings. Or we can let it fall into a haphazard condition with no real continuity or purpose behind it, with unpainted, ramshackle buildings surrounded by weeds and debris. In both cases, the land is the same. It's what we do with it that makes the difference. The potential for a miracle is there, if only we're wise enough to see it and to realize that our fulfillment as persons depends upon our reaction to what we've been given. To come up with ways to increase your service, read books on your specialty, read what matters, have found to work well for them. Listen to our video programs, but at the same time, think of original and creative ways to increase your service, ways that are unique with you and the way you are. Going at it strong for a week or a month and then falling back into old habits is just like working for a week or a month on that plot of ground and then abandoning it. Before long, it will be no better than before. Each morning and during the day, ask yourself this question: how can I increase my service today, knowing that my rewards in life must be in exact proportion to my service? Do this every day and you will have started to form one of life's most valuable habits. Horace Mann wrote, "If any man seeks for greatness, let him forget greatness and ask for truth, and he'll find both." You can banish all the confusion and complications, nagging worries, and vague, half-formed fears by returning to the great truths, the great laws, the great verities on which all success, all accomplishment, on which the whole world is built. Drive down any street in the country, any street in any neighborhood or farm community, and you can quickly see what the people on that street are doing for the good of the community by observing what the community is doing for them. Have you ever looked at it that way? Try it. When we look at a place of business, we can tell what it's doing for the community by observing what the community has done and is doing for the place of business. Is it thriving and growing, or is it just holding its own? Or is it soon to go out of business? Whatever the situation, it's a reflection of its service and of how well its service, whatever it may be, is being accepted by the people. Is it meeting their needs and wants? It's the same with families and their places of residence. That's why I said you could drive down any street. Some streets are lined with beautiful, expensive homes. Other neighborhoods are obviously suffering from poverty. Buildings are ramshackle, weeds are growing in the yards, tin cans and rubbles are strewn everywhere. There are rusted cars. It's a reflection of what the people living in those homes, beautiful and expensive or run down and filthy, are doing for them and for the community, and that's it. It's always been a matter of interest to me that in neighborhoods with high unemployment, the people there don't seem to have enough time to keep their homes and yards tidy, while those who are working with the hardest, doing the most, have the cleanest, most attractive homes with well-manicured lawns and flower gardens. Environment is a mirror of the people in that neighborhood. Change the people, and the environment will change accordingly. It reminds me of the old saying, "What you are speaks so loudly that I can't hear what you are saying." One day, a man was watching a professional football game on television. His 5-year-old son kept bothering him, so the man tore out a page of the Sunday paper. It was a full-page airline and that showed a picture of the world, the planet Earth as seen from space. He tore up the page into a dozen pieces and gave them to his son. He said to him, "Here, put this picture together with this cellophane tape and show Daddy how smart you are." He then went back to watching his football game. In a surprisingly short time, the youngster had taped the picture back together. It wasn't very neat, but it was a very good job indeed for one so young. And the father said, "Hey, that's amazing. How did you put the world together so quickly?" The little boy said, "There was a picture of a man on the other side. I just put the man together, and then the world was all together. The youngster was no doubt surprised by the big warm hug he got. His father said, "That's right, son. When the man is all together, his world is all together too." Being together is understanding how things work. Working hard won't do it. That isn't enough. We have to work intelligently. How often have we heard someone say, "My father worked hard all his life but never had anything to show for it"? It's another way of saying, "My father, may he rest in peace, never quite figured out how things work. He worked hard all his life, but it was at a job with very limited service." Or in another case, it goes like this: "My father was a very bright person, but he kept jumping from one thing to another. He was always looking for the pot of gold at the end of the rainbow, but he never stayed with one thing long enough to work it out." Succeeding takes time. It takes dedication, 100% commitment, and creative thought. We must keep asking ourselves, how can I broaden my service and by so doing increase my harvest, my rewards? All right, how can we correct the situation? William James gave us the answer. He wrote, either some unusual stimulus fills them with emotional excitement, or some unusual idea of necessity induces them to make an extra effort of will. Excitement, ideas, and efforts, in a word, are what carry us over the dam. All right, let your goal represent the excitement. Your ideas and efforts will weigh down the service end of the scale, and the rewards must and will follow. They'll be yours. They are yours the moment you realize this truth. As you sow, so shall you reap all the years of your life. If you're worried about your income or your future, you're concentrating on the wrong end of the scale. Look at the other end. Concern yourself only with increasing your service, with becoming great where you are, and your income and your future will take care of themselves. Don't be like the person sitting in front of that empty fireplace and asking for the heat. You're asking for the impossible. Pile in the wood first. The heat will come as a result. Next time you're off by yourself in a quiet place, contemplate your plot of ground, your life, and begin to sow the seeds that will yield you a rich and abundant harvest. In William James' essay on vital reserves, he wrote, "Compared with what we ought to be, we are only half awake. Our fires are damped, our drafts are checked. We are making use of only a small part of our possible mental and physical resources." Stating the thing broadly, we went on to write, "The human individual thus lives usually far with his limits. He possesses powers of various sorts which he habitually fails to use. He energizes below his maximum and he behaves below his optimum."